Hey up everybody, my name is Joshua Morrison, director of Johnny Moz's Lessons in Confidence, and today I want to talk about making little bits of art, right? If you're watching this channel, you're probably making some little bits of art, whether that's you're making music, you're making films, you're painting, you're drawing, you're sewing, you're doing cross stitch. There's all kinds of forms of art, right? And I think us as human beings are generally fairly creative inclined. We like to find creative solutions to things, even if it's not necessarily literally a creative bit of art. We like to find some creative solution to something. We like to think outside the box, and we always talk about how thinking outside the box is a positive thing. I mean, there might be some alien race out there that says that thinking outside the box is a really terrible thing, that everyone should think inside the box, but we don't think like that. We think that it's good to think outside the box, right? And a lot of people are making individual bits of art, right? And they're putting however much effort they're putting into it. It's usually too much effort. People are usually putting in far more effort than they're actually getting back out of the piece of art. Like the actual satisfaction that they gain from making stuff isn't matching the effort that they're actually putting into something. If you put 100 hours into a drawing and you only get a little bit of satisfaction, like you obviously get a big bit of satisfaction when it's done, but you know, 6 months down the line, if it's just another drawing alongside all the other shitty ones that you did really quickly, what was the point of spending that long on something when you could have made 10 things in that time, right? I often think about Stanley Kubrick, who's dedicated himself to making like something over the course of a decade. He said, you need to really love your idea because you're going to be with it for the next decade, right? And I don't see why you necessarily have to do that. Why can't you just spend a year on something and then move on to the next thing, and then spend a year on that and then move on to the next thing, and then spend a year on that, and so on and so forth, right? Like with these videos, for instance, I put out 2 a day, right? And to me, none of them are precious. None of them is meant, no one of them is meant to be like my magnum opus, right? I'm not interested in making a magnum opus because the magnum opus will come from sheer happenstance. You'll accidentally stumble across your best thing ever, right? Through just making lots of things, rather than setting out to make your magnum opus. Look at Francis Ford Coppola. He spent something like 40 years trying to get Megalopolis made, right? It went through so many different forms of development, from the 70s to the 90s to the 2010s when it was finally originally made. And look at how it came out. It was shite. No one wanted to watch it. It was fucking awful, right? And so that was his magnum opus, right? And this is the man who made The Godfather, right? So if he's gone to all that effort to make Megalopolis, right? Think about you, because you're not nearly as talented as Francis Ford Coppola, right? And he knew what he was doing with Megalopolis. He's not a stupid person. He had a clear, interesting vision with that, right? The whole thing to do with time. And I thought there was an interesting little idea in there. It just wasn't executed properly. And if it had been executed properly, then it could have actually been a good movie. But at the end of the day, it wasn't executed properly. Not because of a lack of talent, but I think because after working on it for so long, he's refined the idea so much that he's refined all the imperfections and what the personality from this original product. He's sitting there with a sander, endlessly fucking doing that, sanding it off. This is the 70s. This is the 80s, right? This is the 90s. Do you see it's starting to get a bit whiter, right? If I kept doing this, I'd draw blood. And that's what Francis Ford Coppola did. He scratched it down to the bone. And eventually, it just becomes pointless. Do you want to do that? Do you want to spend your life making Megafuckalopolis, right? I certainly don't. I've spent the last 5 years making a Sheffield Psychedelic, my debut feature film, and I don't want to spend that long ever making something ever again. I like doing these small, little projects that maybe take like a month at most. That to me is where the satisfaction comes, because if it's a good idea, then fantastic. And if it's a bad idea, oh well, I can move on to the next thing in a month. So it's not a big deal, it's not a big problem. But as artists, we generally end up spending a lot longer than we would have liked on creative works. We always end up scratching ourselves to the bone, trying to make ourselves perfect, right? And it's just not the right way to go about things, right? Because it doesn't need to be a magnum opus. It just needs to be itself, whatever it might be. Even if you're making like a 2.5 hour epic, right? It doesn't need to be your magnum opus. You should never, ever, ever, ever set out to make your magnum opus. You should only ever set out to make whatever it is that you're making, right? Whether you're fucking Roman Polanski making The Pianist, that's fairly magnum opus-ish, right? Big 2.5 hour story that's quite personal to him, with a key, like, you know, series of events, right? Set in a historical time period on an epic scale, fairly magnum opus like. How about Schindler's List from Steven Spielberg? Very similar thing, but in fact basically exactly the same thing, same time period and all, right? So you've got these two films that are magnum opus, right? But they didn't, and the difference is that Roman Polanski spent ages working on The Pianist, right? Steven Spielberg was making Jurassic Park at the same time he was making Schindler's List, right? Now, Roman Polanski and Steven Spielberg, obviously different kinds of directors, one of which is kind of a paedophile, and the other one, he's probably got his own problems, I don't know enough about him. But if you're making that many films, like Steven Spielberg is an incredibly prolific director. He's making like 2-3 films a year around this period, right? Roman Polanski wasn't making anywhere near that amount, possibly because he'd been blacklisted for the industry because he's a paedophile, right? But the difference is that Schindler's List is probably universally regarded as being a better film than The Pianist. And he was making that alongside Jurassic Park, and he'd just come off the back of doing Hook. And then before that was Empire of the Sun and all this other stuff that he was working on, right? He was working on a lot of things at once, right? And you can do the same thing. You can make a lot of really, really great projects, because quality and quantity are not two separate fucking entities. You can either have one or the other, right? You can have both, right? And you should strive to get both. You shouldn't just strive to have quality with no quantity. Well, you're just going to be someone who just releases one song that's really good and then never release another song in your life. If you set out to do that, you wouldn't actually make one song that's really good. You'd make one song that's mediocre or even garbage, right? Because you didn't have enough experience to actually go out and make stuff. You don't know how to make a song because you've only made this one, because you're so focused on quality over quantity. And if you get yourself caught up in quality over quantity, right, you're going to end up miserable, sitting there like Francis Ford Coppola, working again and again and again and again on Megalopolis. Stop working on fucking Megalopolis. The thing you're working this hard on is going to be shit. So just get it out there, get it over and done with, and move on with your fucking life, because you've got a better idea somewhere in your brain that I bet your brain would much rather be working on, right? The amount of ideas that I missed out on actually producing because I spent all this time on a Sheffield psychedelic is absolutely disgusting. If I just pushed it out the door in 2022 rather than waiting all of this time to release it now, I could have made so many more interesting things. I could have done so much of my life. I could have gone so many adventures, but I didn't. I sat there and I got in my own head about it, right? I made Megalopolis, right? And you don't have to repeat the same mistakes that I made. You can easily get the thing that you're doing now, just get it done. You can easily get it done if you just think about what it needs, right? It needs a bit of editing, it needs a bit of mixing, it needs a bit of engineering. It doesn't need all the bells and whistles that you think it needs. It just needs the bare essentials, just so you can get it done and out the door, because all the bells and whistles mean nothing in the world, right? You ever get a fucking Lamborghini with a load of bells and whistles on it? You take the bells off because they're making a load of noise and getting in the way of the engine. You don't want a Lamborghini with bells and whistles on it, right? You want a nice, trusty Land Rover that can get you anywhere that you need. They can get you up the hills and get you down the hills. I'm talking like mud slopes, not just like your bog standard fucking motorway just going up a hill. You can easily get yourself a Land Rover because they're a lot cheaper and more efficient and more long lasting than a Lamborghini. So why would you set off on getting the thing that has all the fucking flash and all the fucking colour and is taking ages to put together? Lamborghinis take something like 1.5 years to fucking make. Let's actually Google that just so that I haven't just completely spouted a load of shite. How long does it take to make a Lamborghini? How long does it take to make a Lamborghini? Several months, right? That's a long time. I bet the other cars that are made in the factory, they're done in like 15 minutes. You want a Nissan? You can get 20 Nissans, and 20 Nissans is better than one Lamborghini any day of the week. So go out there and just focus on what is important, which is consistency. It's not about making the best thing in the universe once. It's about making good to decent, sometimes even mediocre and kind of crap things once in a while. But it's about the consistency of doing it multiple times. And the more that you do it, the better you'll get at it. And the better you get at it, the more efficient you'll be at making the stuff. And the more efficient you get at it, the better the stuff will be. And you make this long-lasting cycle, right? With these videos that I'm making now, I release 2 a day. I used to only be able to film 2 in one day. Now I can film like 8. And the quality hasn't dropped off. The quality's ever so slightly increased. The shot compositions are a little bit more interesting. The locations are a little bit more interesting. I feel like I've got a bit more vigor with my speech, and I'm a little bit less socially anxious about what people on the internet are going to think of me. Right? I'm spouting a lot of shit right now, right? And I'm not particularly bothered about the reception to that, because I know in my deepest of hearts that I have the capacity to make my magnum opus by accident, without having to spend 40 fucking years like Francis Ford Coppola did, right, making Megalopolis. So the next film, or whatever it is that I make, the next album or documentary that I make after this film that I'm releasing soon called A Sheffield Psychedelic, the next thing that I make after that, I know for a fact it's going to be so much better, and it's going to be made so much faster, right? Because you can have quantity and quality. You don't have to pick one or the other. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you managed to get something out of this. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think that this was a complete incoherent rant from a maniac, or do you think that there's actually something to glean from this? And if there is, I hope you managed to glean that thing, right? Please tell me your thoughts, give me your anecdotes. What's the longest time that you've spent working on a piece of art, right? And what's the shortest time that you've spent working on a piece of art, right? And which of those two things was better, right? So thank you very much for watching, everybody. Take care, and bye-bye.